slow motion. I waffle, I vacillate, I get insecure, I come on too strong. I conduct little psychological experiments on myself or the woman involved. You get the picture. This goes on for a couple of painfully awkward weeks, and then we both spend week 7 in the fervent hope that the relationship will magically dissolve on its own, through an act of God or spontaneous combustion. Anything to avoid having to actually navigate the tediously perilous terrain of a full-blown breakup. The last week is spent taking some time, which ends with a final perfunctory phone call finalizing the arrangement and resolving any outstanding logistics. I'll drop the bag and don a Karen sweater you left in my apartment with the doorman. You can keep the books I lent you. Thanks for the memories, no hard feelings. Let's stay friends, etc. ad nauseum. I know it bespeaks poor character to blame others for your problems, but I'm fairly certain this is all Carly's fault. Carly Diamond was my high school girlfriend, the first, and to date, only, woman I've ever loved. We were together for our entire senior year and loved each other with the fierce, timeless conviction of teenagers. That was the same year that all the terrible events described in my novel occurred, and my relationship with her was the lone bright spot in my dismally expanding universe. If you want to get technical about it, we never actually broke up. We graduated high school and went to different colleges, Carly up to Harvard and me down to NYU. We tried to do the long-distance thing, but my adamant refusal to return to the falls for our mutual vacations made it difficult, and over time we simply grew apart, but we never formally dissolved our relationship. After college, Carly came to New York to study journalism, at which point we embarked on one of those long, messy, postgraduate friendships where you have just enough sex to thoroughly confuse the hell out of each other and ultimately, through a sequence of poor timing and third-party complications, fuck the life out of what was once the purest thing you'd ever known. I've never forgiven myself for the head games I played with her during the years in New York, wooing her whenever I felt her slipping away, and then pulling back the minute I felt secure again. I allowed her unwavering belief in us to sustain me even at times when I didn't share it, leading her along with promises, both spoken and implied, but never fulfilled. By the time I finally began to understand how badly I'd been using her, I had used her up completely. She left New York heartbroken and disgusted, returning to the Falls to accept the position as managing editor of the Minuteman, the town's local paper. Every time I think I've gotten over her, I find myself waking in the middle of the night, pining for her with such desperation that you would think it was only yesterday, and not 10 years ago that she left. Since then, not a day goes by that I am not haunted by a vague but powerful sense of regret, every woman I date serving as a reminder of what I allowed myself to lose. So, in a way, it's because of Carly that I'm alone in bed in the middle of the night when the phone rings, its electronic wail piercing the insulated silence of my apartment like a siren. Generally speaking, when people call you at 2 in the morning, it won't be good news. My first thought, as I swim up through the dense wormwood haze of alcohol-induced sleep, is that it has to be Natalie, my borderline psychotic ex-girlfriend, calling to scream at me. I don't know what damage I could have possibly done to her apparently fragile psyche in 8 weeks, but her latest therapist has convinced her that she still has significant unresolved issues with me, and that it behooves her, from a mental wellness perspective, to call me, day or night, whenever it occurs to her to remind me what an insensitive jerk I was. The calls started about 4 months ago and now come fairly regularly, both at home and on my cell phone, 30-second installments of furious invective with abundant smatterings of vulgarity, requiring absolutely no participation from me. If it happens that I'm unavailable, Nat is perfectly content to leave her colorful harangues on my voicemail. She's always been drawn to radical therapy, much as lately I seem to be drawn to women who require it. The phone keeps ringing. I don't know if it's been 2 rings or 10. I just know it isn't stopping. I roll onto my side and rub my face vigorously, trying to coax the sleep from my head. The skin of my cheeks feels like putty, loose and fleshy, as if the night's prior excesses have dramatically aged me. I went out with Owen earlier, and, as usual, we got supremely shit-faced. Owen Hobbs, agent extraordinaire, is my emissary not only to the literary establishment, but to all conceivable manner of chaos and debauchery. I never drink except when I'm with him, and then I drink like him, voraciously and with great ceremony. He's made me rich, and he gets 15%, which has turned out to be a better foundation for a friendship than you might think, usually worth the thrashing hangovers that always follow what he terms our celebrations. The phone. Without moving my head from where it lies embedded in my pillow, I reach out in the general direction of my night table, knocking over some magazines, an open bottle of Aleve, and a half-filled mug of water, which splashes mutely on the plush ecru carpeting. The cordless is actually on the floor to begin with, and when I finally locate it and hoist it up to my immobile head, cold droplets of spilled water seep into my ear canal like slugs. "Hello?" It's a woman's voice. "Joe?" "Who's this?" I say, lifting my head slightly so as to move the mouthpiece somewhere in the general vicinity of my mouth. It's not Nat, which means some speaking on my part might be required. "It's Cindy." "Cindy," I repeat carefully. "Your sister-in-law." "Oh, that's Cindy. Your father's had a stroke." My brother's wife blurts this out like a premature punchline. "Where's Brad?" I say, keeping my voice just above a whisper as people who live alone do needlessly at night. "He's over at the hospital," Cindy says. She's never liked me, but that isn't entirely her fault. I've never actually given her any reason to. "What happened?" "Your dad's in a coma," she says matter-of-factly, as if I've asked her the time. "It's quite serious. They don't know if he's going to make it. Brad said you shouldn't come tonight, but that you should meet him at the hospital tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I repeat dumbly, looking at the clock again. It already is tomorrow. "You can stay with us or you can stay at your father's place. Actually, his house is closer to the hospital." "Okay." Somewhere in my diminishing stupor, it registers that my presence is being requested, or, rather, presumed. Either way, it's highly unusual. "Well, which is it? Do you want to stay with us or at your dad's?" A more compassionate person might wait for the shock to wear off before pressing ahead with the petty logistics of the whole thing, but Cindy has little in the way of compassion where I'm concerned. "Whatever," I say, "whatever's better for you guys." "Well, it's usually a madhouse here with the kids and all," she says. "I think you'll be happier in your old house." "Okay. Okay then," Cindy finally says. "So we'll see you tomorrow?" "Yeah," I say, as if it happens all the time. I left Bush Falls when I graduated high school and haven't been back since. There's never been any compelling reason to visit my hometown, and about 1,000,000 reasons to stay away. My father still lives there, for one, in the 4-bedroom colonial where I spent the first 18 years of my life, and it's been many years since we had any use for each other. Every year, usually around Thanksgiving, Brad calls, inviting me to come stay with him and Cindy, have turkey with the family. But I know he just likes to take the opportunity to feel noble. This is Brad, after all, my older brother by 4 years, who once sent me to the emergency room by jokingly bearing down on me in our father's weather-beaten Grand Am soon after he'd gotten his driver's license, as I stood innocently shooting hoops in our front yard. The car didn't stop quite where he'd planned, and I ended up with a broken wrist and a separated shoulder, which wasn't what I'd planned either. Later, he claimed that I darted out in front of the car without any warning. Whether or not my father believed him was irrelevant, because there was a big game against Fairfield the following night, and Bush Falls was counting on Brad to lead the Cougars one game closer to a second state championship. My father would have thought it unseemly to punish the town hero. Meet the family. My mother, Linda, was a manic depressive, diagnosed too late, who graciously killed herself by jumping into the Bush River Falls and drowning when I was 12 years old. I can sometimes remember her as she was before the onslaught of her insanity, and the subsequent barrage of antidepressants that failed to ease the pain as they slowly choked the vitality out of her. A tall, soft-spoken woman with smiling eyes and an impish grin that always made you feel like you were in on some private joke together. When she kissed me goodnight, she called me Jojo Bear. Her laugh was infectious, her frequent tears a vexing mystery. Brad, my father, and I bobbed violently in the thrashing wake of her suicide, utterly incapable of relating to one another, without her gentle, feminine presence to corral us. Ultimately, Brad and my dad found a common ground in basketball. Brad was a star forward for the Bush Falls Cougars, and in Bush Falls you could aspire to nothing greater. He led the Cougars to 2 state championship titles, breaking a busload of scoring records along the way. He fucked many cheerleaders. That was pretty much all there was to Brad back then, fucking and basketball. Not bad work if you could get it. But I couldn't. And thus Brad could not relate to me but simply viewed me with a mixture of bemused pity and disdain. As far as I was concerned, Brad was a moron, shallow and one-dimensional, and I wanted nothing more than to be him. My father, Arthur, had been a somewhat less spectacular player for the Cougars himself, and he never missed one of Brad's games, home or away. Afterward, they would discuss plays.